1999 The Podcast is a production of the Cage Club Podcast Network. For more podcasts on movies, comics, and all things pop culture, head to cageclub.me. To contact us with questions, comments, or just to say hi, send us an email at 1999@cageclub.me. You can find me on Twitter at probablyrealjb and Joey at Soulpot. And you can follow the show on Twitter at 1999 The Podcast. To support the show, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. The show is written, produced, and edited by us. Welcome to 1999 The Podcast, the only podcast you are listening to right now. How's that?
That might not be true.
That'd be weird if it weren't. I'm John Brooks.
I'm Joey Lewandowski.
How do you listen to two podcasts at once?
I've seen in movies which always directly reflect real life. I've seen people with like Lucy brain. You know Lucy, the Scarlett Johansson movie where she takes a pill and unlocks the full potential of her brain.
Oh, not my dog. Not my dog. Okay, yeah.
No, not the Scarlett Johansson plays your dog. She's got to stop taking other species parts.
I know.
It's too much.
There are dogs who need work.
No, where she unlocks, because it's like, we only use 10% of our brains. So it sounds like, what if she uses 100%?
Which is annoying and stupid and not true, but yeah.
That movie rules. I love that movie.
Yeah. Okay.
But there are movies where people are like, oh, I can do this. So they're reading two books at once, or they have like, I do think there are real people who like can listen to like an audiobook in one ear and a podcast in the other ear somehow. It seems impossible. I'm just saying there's a non-zero chance someone is listening to this podcast and then another podcast, but not another podcast about 1999 because this is the only one.
If you're listening to two podcasts right now, send us an email and explain how that works, because that would be very interesting.
Do we tell people? Do we give out our email address? Do people know our email address?
Yeah, at the beginning, but it's 1999@cageclub.me.
Oh, right, it's in that intro thing. Yeah.
John at cageclub.me, or like whatever. Find us on
Mailbag, King, family. No, just put a word at cageclub.me and I'll get it probably.
Yeah, pretty much. I got to make a correction from last week, by the way. I realized that last week I referred to the events of Ravenous as having taken place during the Spanish-American War. It's, of course, the Mexican-American War. I am stupid.
Wow, are you canceled?
I apologize to all the veterans of both of those wars, which I'm sure were fought for unproblematic and not racist reasons. So,
is either of those the Alamo?
No, maybe. Yes, I think the Mexican-American War is the Alamo,
but
that was definitely fought for racism. So.
Wait, is Ravenous Mexican-American? Which one's right, which one's wrong? I already forgot the correction. Can you remind me the correction?
Is Mexican-American.
So Ravenous is the Alamo.
The Alamo was a battle during the Mexican-American War.
So, okay. Good to have a time and a place. I just watched an episode of King of the Hill about the Alamo, but the whole point of the episode was that they don't teach the Alamo anymore, and so Hank had to teach Bobby the real Alamo. So I should know, but I don't know.
The Alamo is like connected to the Mexican-American War.
Okay.
I think it looks like it predated it. Yeah, I don't know anything about. It's so confusing. America's been in a lot of wars. If America were in fewer wars, I wouldn't have these problems. Anyway, sorry to dishonor the memory of those, I'm sure, important occasions. Anyhow, moving on. Shall we get to today's movie?
Sure.
Great. Well, we are continuing our trend in this round, which, aside from the talented Mr. Ripley, is kind of shaping up to be the cult classic round, it sounds like. The 125th highest grossing movie of 1999. It centers around a beauty pageant in Mount Rose, Minnesota, and was written by a former beauty pageant contestant from Rosemount, Minnesota. 1985's Minnesota Junior Miss Lona Williams, and directed by former The State cast member and accomplished TV director Michael Patrick Jann, with music by Devo's Mark Mothersbaugh. It stars Kirsten Dunst, Denise Richards, Allison Janney, Ellen Barkin, Kirstie Alley, Mindy Sterling, Sean McMurray, Matt Malloy, Michael McShane, Will Sasso, Williams herself, Thomas Lennon, Adam West as himself, the late Brittany Murphy, and making her movie debut, one Amy Adams.
Blonde Amy Adams.
Blonde Amy Adams. Requested by friend of the show, Chelsey Weber-Smith. Today we are discussing the cult classic mockumentary, Drop Dead Gorgeous. Joey,
Yeah.
what is Drop Dead Gorgeous about?
It's about Amy Adams having blonde hair and me being
That's
like, is
the
that Amy
entire plot.
Adams? And then Googling it and be like, it is Amy Adams.
It's Amy
Sometimes I get
Adams.
this right. Have I told you the story on this podcast or any podcast where we were doing Song to Song by Terrence Malick on Too Fast, Too Forever? And when we start, no, that was on Boyfriend Material, the Ryan Gosling podcast. That's the film he's in. And when we got on there, my co-host Joe was like, yeah, who was this blonde Natalie Portman chick? She was pretty good. I was like, it was Natalie Portman with blonde hair.
Portman. Yeah.
And I have hair blindness, but that was worse than it's ever been. But I was just like, is this Amy Adams? It looks like Amy Adams, and it sounds like Amy Adams, and it seems like Amy Adams. It was.
It's the first Amy Adams. It's Amy Adams Prime. Yeah. That's her. What else happens?
That's it. That's all I got from the 97 minutes of this movie. I mean, it's really good.
Yeah.
It's really good, but it's a lot of Amy Adams. Okay.
Yeah.
Drop Dead Gorgeous. I wrote this down because there's a lot that happens, and I know that a lot of people love this movie. I want to make sure that I get it right. So instead of half-assing my job like I do in the past, I'm going to full-ass it right now.
Full ass.
Drop Dead Gorgeous.
Here we go.
Follows a group of girls vying to win. This is why I really wrote it down, because I want to make sure I got this name right. Vying to win the annual Sarah Rose Cosmetics Mount Rose American Teen Princess Pageant Beauty Pageant. I was like, that's a lot of words. I want to make sure I get that right. So the main competitors,
with a $50 scholarship for the vocational school of your choice for third place.
I realized that Brittany Murphy in this movie is Luann from King of the Hill. Speaking of King of the Hill, that's the same kind of, but yes. The main competitors include Kirsten Dunst, who's sort of like an ambitious homebody, and Denise Richards, who is the wealthy frontrunner and daughter of the woman running the pageant, played by Kirstie Alley. People think that the pageant will be rigged for her to win. As it gets close, weird stuff starts happening. People start dying, including a tractor explosion and a hunting accident and a trailer explosion. There's lots of explosions. So then more accidents happen at the pageant itself. Eventually, Denise Richards wins. Kirsten Dunst comes in second, but then Denise Richards dies when the victory float she's riding on explodes. Kirstie Alley goes crazy in grief and rage and admits to causing all the accidents, and she goes to jail. Kirsten Dunst moves into the winner's sash and advances to states where she's the only one who doesn't eat bad shellfish and sort of automatically becomes Miss Minnesota. She goes to nationals only to find out that Sarah Rose was busted for tax evasion. There is no pageant anymore. Kirstie Alley breaks out of jail to kill Kirsten Dunst. In her standoff with police, she accidentally shoots a news reporter on scene. Kirsten Dunst steps into her role, is handed an anchor job due to her poise under pressure, fulfilling her life's goal of becoming Diane Sawyer.
Nicely done. That was
all
good.
Told in a mockumentary style.
Mostly, yeah. Although it breaks style from time to time, but it is one of the early adopters. We'll talk about this, I think, later in the episode. But it's one of the early adopters of the now ubiquitous mockumentary style. Outside
it's
of
mid
the
Christopher Guest, though. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, Spinal Tap was very much earlier, but it was shortly after Guffman.
After Guffman and right before Best in Show.
Right.
So,
yeah. Released on July the 23rd in a reasonably wide 1,200 theaters, the film opened at $4 million in 11th place behind The Phantom Menace in its 1 millionth week, in a crowded but fairly uncompetitive weekend in which The Haunting and Inspector Gadget both topped the box office, going on to make $10.5 million on a $15 million budget. Its performance could hardly have been helped by its critical reception. The movie holds a 47 rating on Rotten Tomatoes with just 74 reviews and a 28 Metacritic score based on 28 reviews. Its Metacritic user score isn't much better at 4.7, but with more than 50,000 user ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, it holds a 75% audience score. Without question, its biggest supporter at the time was Salon's Mary Elizabeth Williams, whose Metacritic score is a 90, and who in a review, which, spoiler alert, I found seemed to be taking its words directly from my own thoughts, began by writing, quote, "Whatever else you can say about it, the summer of 99 will not be remembered as the summer of subtlety. Climbing Mercury and a broader brand of humor have always gone hand in hand, from the era of Animal House right through to South Park. But this year's really been a standout, with all its pie stupping and poop drinking and giant talking clitorises. After all that, could anything possibly raise our eyebrows? Well, yes. In a very crowded field of competitors, Drop Dead Gorgeous just may be the most gasp-inducing, un-PC offering yet. Sex and shit, after all, are pretty innocuous targets. But it really takes cojones for a film to take aim at Christianity, eating disorders, voyeurism, and the mentally and physically handicapped. The real revelation, then, is that much of it is genuinely viciously funny. You can't stop laughing, even when you feel really bad about yourself for doing so. Williams goes on to praise Barkin and Janney in particular, call out Allie's performance for being too broad and screechy, and says that, quote, as the battling contestants, Dunst and Richards are fine, though they aren't required to do much more than smile or sneer as the situation merits. She concludes, because it sets itself up as a faux documentary, Drop Dead Gorgeous may be creating a higher standard of realism than it ultimately attains. As a successor to, say, This is Spinal Tap, it doesn't measure up in breathless, seemingly unscripted chaos. But as an absurdist face of the already absurd real world and small-town beauty pageants, it's deliriously outrageous.
I feel like some of that they didn't understand what they were watching.
Mm.
I feel like that's probably true of a lot of people in 1999 watching a lot of these movies that we, especially this season, that people are like, this is my favorite movie of all time. I want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
That they, they're like, oh, it's too broad. It's like, well, that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah. The other end of the spectrum, the Austin Chronicle's Mark Savlov, whose Metacritic, I'm not going to ask if you know him, whose Metacritic score is a 0.
You
do know Mark?
Oh, no, not anymore. I have consciously uncoupled from him.
Okay.
I'm trying to bring that phrase back. I'm trying to bring back consciously uncoupled. You think it's
it never arrived.
It worked once, right?
One time. Whose Metacritic score is 0, and who wrote, quote, the film manages to take a clever idea or two and run them into the ground with all the finesse of a backhoe. One of the film's less clever running gags, alongside Miss Atkins' alcoholism, is the over-the-top use of Minnesota vernacular, including the cringe-inducing "yeah, you betcha," which crops up almost as much as it does in the Coen brothers' Fargo, a film in which such dialogue was actually put to good use. Jan's use of a mockumentary style of filmmaking here is also deeply flawed, frequently abandoning the conceit and turning into a straight comedy, which of course renders the whole effect null and void. Allie's maddeningly broad style of comic theatrics doesn't help much either, though at least Dunst comes across as a gifted actress here. She is the only bright spot in a film constructed of used and confused gags, a lowbrow clunker with highbrow intentions. And of those two reviews, that review was far more the sort of
the norm,
the consensus, among critics at the time.
I mean, I get it. I feel like we're going to have some sort of conversation similar to the one we had with Jawbreaker, right? Where it's like it takes time to build and whatever, but it's like, and I also know that I don't want to world's tiniest violin. I don't want to say that, film critics have the world's most difficult job, but I know that watching 3 movies by noon and then having to write reviews by 6 or whatever, it's not, it's not the ideal way to watch movies, but man, did you not get any of it?
Yeah, we talked about that. I mean, the way that critics have to watch movies is not ideal. It's not the way that movies are supposed to be watched necessarily. And sometimes it's just like they had a bad day. But also, it's hard to, if you're watching 3 movies in a day, you're not going to give this one the kind of time and space that it needs. And I can kind of see, I don't know. It was ahead of its time, and I think that was actually a detriment to it in some ways. But again,
I think I get that. I think the sad part about it, to a certain extent, is that, and this isn't a reflection of this movie in particular, but any of these movies, is that those reviews last forever, and sites like Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic last forever. And so if you're okay, I don't know anybody in my life who's talking about Drop Dead Gorgeous, but I heard, my friend John said it's pretty good, so I'm gonna go check it out. And you look on Rotten Tomatoes, you're like, oh no, this movie stinks.
Yeah.
Why would I watch this? It's just, I feel like we almost need a critical reconsensus or something. We were talking about, I think with Jawbreaker, where it's almost all the positive reviews are from the last 5 years.
Right.
And so it'd be nice if these websites who make their bread and butter on aggregating reviews were hey, here's the overall, but here's what people think about it in the last 3 to 5 years or whatever. Or just this is what people are thinking about now. American Beauty could go from really high ratings to be ooh, maybe don't watch this or something. The inverse can happen too.
Right. Yeah, and more on that in a second. But very much in the middle of the at the time reviews is Roger Ebert, who gave the film 2 out of 4 stars and who wrote, quote, sometimes I wonder how anyone could have thought a screenplay was funny enough to film. The script for Drop Dead Gorgeous, on the other hand, must have been a funny read. It's the movie that somehow never achieves takeoff speed. Subtle miscalculations of production and performance are probably responsible. Comedy is a fragile rose, eager to wilt. So yeah, he had some good things to say about it, but very much in the middle. And there aren't a ton of reviews in the middle. I mean, most of them are either scathing or pretty glowing. But as you were just alluding to, right, when you look at the way people talk about it now and the reviews that have been written after the fact, they are almost always, while acknowledging sort of some of the movie's shortcomings, overwhelmingly glowing. So one such example is from Teen Vogue's Alex Zaragoza, who on the film's 20th anniversary a few years ago wrote the following. In 1999, this was the story for teen girls who had to work after-school jobs to help save money for college. The teen girls that didn't fit in because they were considered weirdos. The teen girls who laughed their asses off watching a room full of pageant girls cover a pageant stage and vomit. And it's 4 girls dealing with the same stuff now. It's a reminder to be the amber persevering in the face of adversity and to avoid the shellfish if it looks a bit sketchy. The casting in Drop Dead Gorgeous is perfect, stacked with women who were or would go on to be some of the strongest character actors and leads in Hollywood. Allison Janney steals every scene as Loretta, the horny best friend to Amber's mom, played by an equally mesmerizing Ellen Barkin as the post-prime MILF. Amy Adams bit part as the spacey, sex-fueled teen Leslie evokes a woozy Marilyn Monroe, and Brittany Murphy is so unabashedly frenetic and spunky that it makes our loss of the young star feel even greater. The pageant's contestants embody the broad range of weirdo archetypes that we remember from our own high school days, and with one or a few of them, you might even see a version of yourself if you too were a strange teenage misfit. And then in 2021, Slash Films' BJ Colangelo named it her second favorite movie of all time behind Fright Night, writing, quote, "It may be hard to believe considering my current half-shaved head and green-haired appearance, but for over 15 years, I was extremely active in the Midwest beauty pageant scene. Competing in pageants was a huge part of my life, and there are a few people I can relate to about this considering how stigmatized the beauty industry rightfully has become. That said, Drop Dead Gorgeous speaks to me on a religious level. If you've ever wondered what the behind the scenes of a small town pageant looks like, this movie nails it. With no exaggeration, Drop Dead Gorgeous is my favorite comedy film ever made, and if you catch me in the right mood, I can quote the entire film front to back in full Minnesotan accent. Go Muskies, woo."
I love that. I'm also bummed because there's a chance that we talk to this person tonight, and both of my end of episode questions have been in the span of 6 words. Both questions answered.
Yes. However, we still have potentially, not to spoil anything for the next 5 seconds, but we still have one guest for whom you can still ask those questions.
I can also ask BJ the returning questions.
Other stuff, the returning questions, yes, because this is clearly been answered. We know her favorite movie of all time, and we know her favorite 99 movie now. Because Slash Film bitched it. Unless, however, this was like 2 years ago, so she might have knew something might have gotten past Fright Night. But
she might have seen Babylon like me and been like, hold on,
here it is, got a new one. Okay, who are our guests today? We have a full room. We have a very crowded house.
We have a whole pageant.
It's over.
We have a pageant full of people.
Hey now.
We have returning champion of the American Hysteria podcast, Chelsey Weber-Smith. We have producer of the American Hysteria podcast and the band Kowinka, Miranda Zickler. And we have the aforementioned writer from Slash Film and also the host of This Ends at Prom podcast, BJ Colangelo.
I'm excited. All right, we'll be right back with all 3 of them if my internet holds out. And see you in a minute.
You betcha.
Okay.
And everything should be good.
Yay.
Okay.
All right.
Yay.
Oh, amazing.
Yay.
Cool.
Oh, that's
Yay.
good. What a miracle. What are we talking about again? Oh, right. There's a movie.
Our Mount Rose, American Teen Princess.
Very nice.
That's what we're talking about.
Welcome to the podcast, BJ and Chelsey and Miranda.
Thank you.
Hi. So happy to be here. Can't believe it.
I know, it's been a long time coming. So we are here today to talk about Drop Dead Gorgeous. Joey and I talked a little bit about it in the intro, namely what the critics said about it at the time, which was wrong, except for one person. And what people like BJ said about it later on in life, which is correct, which is that it is pretty wonderful and amazing. We already introduced you guys, so like people know who you are. Chelsey, you're a friend of the show status now. Miranda, BJ, you still got one more episode to go before you achieve that lofted status.
It's an aspiration.
So we're not going to get too into it. But let's talk about why everybody in the past was wrong about how great this movie is and why it is that you guys love this movie so much. Chelsey, we'll start with you because this is something that you brought to my attention as something you wanted to talk about like a year and a half ago or something. And you're like, oh, you're doing 99, you got to do Drop Dead Gorgeous. I want to talk about that. So when did you first see this movie, Chelsey? And you didn't see it in the theaters, obviously, because nobody did. But how long has this movie been on your radar? And when did your love story start?
You know, I was thinking about it today, and I cannot remember the first time that I saw this movie, which feels like really, really sad to me. But I do have a solid memory of being probably 12 years old, and it came out when I was 11. So I was there. I was on it as quick as you could be in the VHS world. And my memory is back when I had one of my very first boyfriends. We were watching it, and we kissed that night after watching Drop Dead Gorgeous. So it really spurred on that sort of middle school romance. And that's why I love it to this day. But really, I think what it is, and I think we'll get so into this, but it is the most quotable movie of all time. And
it's up there.
Well, it's the most quotable movie of all time. And so
Except for Speed.
But yeah. Oh, right, of course, except for Speed. But I think that it was that thing where I would meet somebody who'd seen that movie, and it was like we had an instant friendship. And to this day, that is true. And so watching it, it was a bunch of friends and I watching it together, and it was like I already had the movie memorized by the time I was 12. So I must have watched it many, many times that year. And from then on, I mean, I've met people, and my friendships have begun with just a Drop Dead Gorgeous quote. So I think that's why it's so special to me, is that it is. And that's why I thought it was nice that we could get so many people in on this, because it's such a community film.
Yeah. Can confirm.
It's a good point. Like it's one of those movies where because obviously you quote it with the exaggerated Minnesota rural accent.
Oh yeah.
Oh sure.
So like the line combined with the like, come on, it's unmistakable. So people know what you're doing, and if they know, they know, and then you're friends forever. Sort of like when you say shoot the hostage.
Is that from Speed?
From Speed.
I don't remember Speed that well, unfortunately.
Miranda, you're new to the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
And why don't you tell your own personal Drop Dead Gorgeous story?
Sure. Well, I will say I can confirm what Chelsey has just said. I was just recently at a dinner party, and I started singing the Mount Rose American Teen Princess song to a dog, and somebody who I didn't know very well in the room was like, "Oh my God, I love you." And that was, we're good friends now. It was great. But I watched this movie, God, I was like 10 probably, because I'm a little baby. And my older sister, didn't care to adhere to the rules of what a 10-year-old should be watching, which is how Secretary became another canon film of mine. And so I remember watching this movie, and I was intimidated by a lot of these like this content that was too old for me, but watching Drop Dead Gorgeous felt comfortable and like sweet in a way, and it also felt like kind of this like crack down the center of the universe moment where I was like, oh, you can joke about this stuff? Like, she just blew up on her tractor and we can laugh about it?
It's very funny.
This is
It's very
news
funny.
to me.
I will say you are in very good company of podcast guests for this show where entirely too many saw entirely too many of these movies
Right.
way too early, radically too early. I
Yes.
think including Chelsey at the Blair Witch
Yeah.
Project at like 11 years old, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
there are this podcast is really a guidebook in questionable parenting.
Yeah.
It was the end of the 90s.
Or just absent parenting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wistfully sort of talk about the time when, like, oh, I could go ride my bike until, night, and then my parents were fine, and it was fine, everything was fine. And it's like, no, what was really happening is, like, I was watching, like, R-rated movies when I was 9, and because of VHS, and nobody cared. And we didn't have parents until the mid 2000s.
There was no such thing as parents.
It's a fact of American history. BJ, you are a former Midwestern beauty queen.
Uh-huh.
So you relate to this movie. I think you used the word religiously in your bit and slash film there.
Oh yeah.
When did you first encounter it?
So the first time that I saw Drop Dead Gorgeous, I was 11. And it was because, like you said, I did a lot of pageants growing up. I am a retired toddler and tiara, but I did pageants well into my early 20s.
Very
And
nice.
I'm from Illinois, but from a place real close to Wisconsin. So a lot of people do talk this way, which is also fun. But speaking of like questionable parenting, not just pageants, but my parents let me watch whatever I wanted as a kid. So like Serial Mom was my favorite movie when I was like 8. So my parents were totally fine with me watching this, but it was the year that I had won a junior miss title, and there was like a miss, a junior miss, a little miss, and even a tiny miss for like the little toddlers. And my miss was like, hey, do you want to come over for a movie night? We're going to watch Miss Congeniality and Drop Dead Gorgeous. And she asked my mom's permission for Drop Dead Gorgeous, and obviously my mom didn't give a flying hell. So I watched it and lost my mind. I thought it was the funniest thing I had ever seen, and like immediately was starting to quote everything. I was also a big Kirstie Alley fan because at this point she was just the lady from It Takes Two and not like a crazy Scientologist yet.
Right.
So I had a big affinity for her. Also, the Look Who's Talking movies were a big deal for me, which those movies might also just be a vehicle for Scientology. There's a lot going on with her. But the movie,
We had
like,
two prominent Scientologists in it, so
the movie like really spoke to me, and it just captured this specific type of Midwest living of small town pageants where you legitimately hold your entire hat on, this is how I'm going to get the hell out of this town. And then just the way people communicated, it was very comforting. And it is a movie that I can feel in my bones moving forward.
Joey, I know that you are last to the Drop Dead Gorgeous fandom. I was really, I was very. It sounds like from what we talked about in the intro that I can rest easy with your opinion of this. But I was really curious as to what you would make of it. I know you watched it for the first time probably in the last week or so. Is that
yesterday?
Yesterday, okay.
Wow.
Very, very recently.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Yeah, I think this movie is just about perfect, aside from the Will Sasso stuff, which I'm sure we will talk lots about. And I didn't mean to give John a spit take there, but I guess we're that early. No, I just think it's amazing. Like this is the kind of movie that I put on Twitter that I'm mad at all of my friends who didn't yell at me to watch this.
Yeah.
Like the same thing, like weirdly with the South Park movie, also 99 movie, I guess this year, where I'm like, why did no one tell me this was a musical? Like I don't like South Park, but like this works for me in a way that I didn't think. Like there's certain things I'm just like, you know me well enough. Have me watch things that you know I'm going to like, and this is one of those. And I didn't have anyone. I have one friend, Lily. My friend Lily, this is her favorite movie of all time. She probably told me to watch it at some point. Sorry, Lily. But yeah, no one else did. And I am mad at every single one of them because I wish that I saw this a bunch of times instead of just the once.
Well, I was lucky enough. This came out during my video store days. So I was lucky enough to have that, like, I had that one particular friend who I worked with at the video store, she was the kind of person that like this movie was for. And it was one of those movies. So this was probably in the summer of 2000. So it was like a year after it came out, but it was one of those movies that like we got, screeners for or whatever. And she was like, oh, you need to watch this one. I'm like, that movie, but that movie got very bad reviews from the critics. And I'm very, whatever. So she's like, no, it's really, really great. You got to watch it. And I did. And I liked it and thought it was very funny the first time, but I didn't quite fall in love with it until sort of I watched it a couple of times more over the years. It's one of those movies that, like, as I think Chelsey was pointing out, part of it is like anticipating the lines before they happen. It's almost like Rocky Horror in that way, where you're like, it's participatory. It's like funnier when you know what's coming and when you can say the lines with the with the cast. But I was like, well, why did this movie get such bad reviews? It's like so great and it's trying so hard, and it's like, look at this cast, for fuck's sake. Like, what the fuck is wrong with people? But maybe it was a matter of maybe it was a matter of time. Maybe it just wasn't, the world wasn't ready for it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I have a couple of theories. One is I have a longstanding theory that people don't know what to do with movies where people who are presented as beautiful or pretty are also really, really funny. I think they want
Ooh, I like it.
movies about pageants, like they have to be pretty, or it needs to be a drama about how terrible it is. But the fact that it is such a dark comedy, that juxtaposition makes people really uneasy. I also think that the mockumentary format about something that is so unapologetically femme turned a lot of people off, because I think in people's brains at this point they're just like, oh, mockumentary, that's like a Christopher Guest thing. And this movie is so girl. Like, this is a girl movie. And I think a lot of people don't know what to do with that a lot of times.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, this movie fucking destroys the Bechdel test, right? As did our movie we talked about 2 movies ago, Jawbreaker. Say what you want about them, but like, they aced the Bechdel test pretty phenomenally. I love that, like, on that note, there are no redeemable male characters in this movie, like, at all.
Oh, they're all terrible.
They're all terrible. And then one of the things I love about it, I didn't really think about it until I rewatched it recently, was that the one character who was set up as the the jock boy with a heart of gold guy who's gonna like sweep Kirsten Dunst off her feet, like, she gets shot in the head. like
immediately too. Like, we see the scene where he's introduced. You're like, oh, this is a good dude, and then within 90 seconds he's dead. Right? Like, it's just
he's like Oz from American Pie, and then he just fucking dies.
Well,
like,
hunting's dangerous, so
hazard of the trade.
Hunting hunting is dangerous. I think you have a really good point, though. Like, it's that it is so led by women who, obviously, I mean, in 99 especially, comedies for mass markets led by women were like even rarer than they are today. So that's probably part of what put people off. I also think people just didn't know what to make of it. Like you mentioned the Christopher Guest thing and the mockumentary thing, but that was really nascent at this time. Like, Christopher Guest was like the only person doing that, and he'd only done it twice, right, with Spinal Tap and Guffman at this point. Now it's like literally every sitcom on television is like done this way, right? It's so all over the place. But like, I think it was still sort of experimental at the time. I think maybe that played a role.
And I think too, like, the combination of dark comedy with teen girl movie, because I know BJ talks about on This Ends at Prom a lot that 99 is like the banner year for teen girl movies. And I think putting teenage girls in with something that we're not used to being like a female-led vehicle, except maybe like Heathers, right? I think that's something you could compare it to, and Jawbreaker, but it is kind of a new thing. And I don't think that probably male critics knew exactly what to do with those sort of combinations of factors you bring in the mockumentary. And it is just like, it's an absolute stroke of genius that is like for certain people and maybe not for old men critics, especially.
Yeah, and there are a lot of terrible stereotypes in this movie. My God. But it's like, okay, this is where you draw the line. I think there's
Right.
something else going on here.
And I have a feeling that that's not what the critics were talking about when
Exactly.
they
Yeah,
were
no way.
insulting this movie, or
Exactly.
they would be very, very ahead of their time.
Yeah. So like the anorexia thing, right? Like that, even to me, I had a hard time dealing with this time around in the year 2023. But the idea that there's an anorexia wing of a hospital, which is a joke that gets played over and over again, in some ways, like, I think that's an example of where this movie justifies jokes like that. It sort of tells you, I mean, like the Will Sasso thing we can talk about a little bit later on, but the anorexia part of it, as bleak as it is, even though it gives rise to like one of my favorite lines in the movie, it's it makes it with the it being a wing of the hospital, right? This sort of joke where you kind of know where the punch is being directed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not at anorexics, it's at like this fucking machine of these beauty pageants that like produce these body image issues that like then be like, the way that we solve them is by building a fucking anorexia wing of this local hospital in this place where this beauty pageant like drives girls to that end. And so like there's a lot of movies where a joke like that, I think, they don't work hard enough to at least sort of tell you where it's going, right? And I think I it should deserve some credit, at least for that.
Well, I think the movie also does a really good job of establishing that it's not mean-spirited, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not the girls are not the object of scorn or ridicule. And so to think that that's a joke at their expense is like misreading the movie in a pretty powerful way.
Right.
I agree. And I also think that the fact that Alexandra Holden is playing, Mary Jo Hansen is a bit of like ahead of its time, brilliant meta casting, because she would go on to play a lot of characters like this in her career.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she is the scrawny one in in Sugar and Spice that they put on the top of the pyramid, and they
Right.
put her there because she's the smallest one. So she, in hindsight, that casting is like so beyond brilliant, because it's kind of the first time she does that with her career. But I'm so glad that you noticed that, this is not a mean-spirited movie at the girls, with the exception of obviously Denise Richards as Becky Lehman, because she is what we call in the pageant industry. She's a pageant patty. Because she's just that person who looks like and acts like and speaks like she was made in a pageant factory, where
Mhm.
everything she says sounds like a pageant answer. It doesn't sound like a real person. And so obviously she gets to be at the center of some ridicule, as well as the fact she's the richest person in a small town. And so inherently you're going to want to root against her because, eat the rich. So I think because of that, this movie is just playing with a lot of tropes that we all know exist, but it is being so obvious about them in a way that I don't think a lot of films at this time were doing because they were too afraid to.
And I mean, isn't she like a true Nepo baby in this sense?
Yes.
Right.
She's the man. He's the man of the girl movie. She's the man, right?
Yes.
I do think her character had my biggest laugh, I think, of the entire movie. Well, I mean, I laughed a lot at a lot of things, but I think the biggest laugh I had was the reveal that she was singing to Jesus was something I did not see coming.
The talk singing too. Oh, God.
Oh yes,
entire-
there's no singing. Yeah, right. She
entire
just like
performance.
she's tone deaf.
Unbelievable.
And then her dad is in the audience, like mouthing along, being like, yeah, like just like he taught her how to do it. It's just every moment of that movie is just jam packed with absolutely brilliant humor. It is so far ahead of its time. I can't even believe it.
I think also though, like one of the things that I kind of love about the movie that kind of gives it a sort of an unpretentious charm to me is maybe also where another critic might, or like, somebody watching it at the time who is sort of trying to objectively as possible criticize movies might find some flaw, is that like a lot of it does feel like your very talented friends improv troupe like working in real time, right? Like there's a lot of it that's like they're like jokes that sort of seem improvised and on the fly, and some of them work and some of them don't, but like that's also part of the charm. You know what I mean? Like, especially with Kirsten Dunst, who I think is, I mean, I love Kirsten Dunst. I also think this is like not one of her best performances, but I just don't think this is what she's good at. But I think she's like gives it the old college try, and that's kind of one of the things that I love about it, is that everybody seems to be really kind of invested in sort of making this work. Like weirdly, like we just talked about Ravenous, and it's a movie that is like very similar in terms of like everybody understands the assignment. They might not all be up for it all the time, but like it's just so much fun to watch them try, and to watch Kirsten Dunst like try to do this like weird mockumentary semi-improv comedy thing that sort of gives it that lasting appeal.
Well, I think that's what was the weirdest part about that one review you read in the intro, everyone's favorite subject, the intro, where it's like the only good part of this movie is Kirsten Dunst. And it's just like, well, so you just don't understand what the movie's going for. Because if you think the one good part is the thing that doesn't quite work with the rest of it, like you just didn't appreciate what the movie was actually like successfully pulling off.
Well, she's the straight man of this
Yeah.
comedy. She's surrounded by cartoon characters. So like I think she's doing an excellent job because that's what she's supposed to be. There's a reason she's the one who gets out of Mount Rose and makes something of herself and gets to become, Minnesota's version of Diane Sawyer, because she's not like anyone else in Mount Rose.
Well, let's also make sure we clarify that the straight man in this movie is also tap dancing her way while doing makeup on cadavers and like singing and dancing her way down the highway. Like it is I mean, wonderful, but just like, yes.
Look, I was a competitive pageant girl and a world champion baton twirler while also writing critically about horror when I was 18. She speaks to me.
Absolutely. And the casting directors said that they cast her not because of her performances in other films up to that point, but because of her appearance on Celebrity Jeopardy Teen Edition.
Whoa.
Yeah, because
Makes
they
sense.
saw this and they were like, well, this is a girl who's comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's what we want in
Wow.
this role, which I think is really
That's so
beautiful. And
cool.
she really nailed it.
It's so funny because I cannot like zoom out and look at this movie from any kind of like outside perspective, because like BJ said, it's like it is part of my constitution, and I'm like,
Right.
she is not good in movie. Like I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me to even like try to like it'd be like, is my family member good at being my
Yeah.
family? I don't know. I guess that's a
Yeah.
bad example, but it just doesn't make any sense. And there are movies like that where I could never even begin to try to look at it objectively, because there's just no separating myself from the movie.
I think like the moments for me, because like again, like Kirsten Dunst is someone I love, and she had a banger of a 99, by the way. Like holy shit, the movies that she made that year are just ridiculously amazing, and there's like 4 of them. But yeah, it's the moments where she's like, where she has to do the sort of I'm not actually acting moments, because it's a documentary moments where it's like, and again, I think it's more to do with the fact that there's the form itself was so nascent at the time that very few people had really sort of tried it beyond, again, Christopher Guest. That she's sort of, I think, is sort of like, wait, am I this character, or am I like, you know what I mean? Like, am I doing a character in a movie, or am I doing this moment where I'm like being filmed for a documentary? And it's interesting because like a lot of the people involved in this movie went on to like work on Modern Family and like other sitcoms where you have this sort of like single camera documentary style that is, again, every fucking sitcom at this point now. But it's really interesting kind of time capsule as well, because it's sort of like the first time outside of the Christopher Guest circle where people are starting to experiment with it.
But I also think it does things that I don't think that worked really well for me that other things haven't. Like when the film crews, like when the cops crew and their crew see each other and like, hey man, how you doing?
Introduce each other.
or like the sound guy goes by after eating the shellfish. Like they're in the movie in a way that I haven't seen other mockumentaries do, and I think
Right,
is so
right.
funny. Maybe I think it's extra funny because I haven't seen it elsewhere, but I thought it worked so well here. Also, I was just like, "Is that Thomas Lennon?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, it is
is
Thomas
Thomas
Lennon." But
Lennon.
like, yeah, but like
yeah.
it's just like that stuff worked so well for me. Or
Yeah.
like the one Will Sasso thing I really liked, where like they have on the bottom like we try to remain truly neutral and like not interfere with the subjects or whatever, and he's just like flailing in his suspenders, right? So, man, it's wonderful.
Let me ask you guys a question because I would want to know your perspective on this. How did this become a icon of like queer cinema? Like what?
Look at
Why?
it. Like
I know. No, like I get it instinctively.
baby.
I'm asking the actual sort of like, is there a story of how this was sort of adopted, right, as like this icon of queer cinema?
I think that it follows under the same umbrella as something honestly like a Jawbreaker, where 99 is a massive year for teen movies for sure. But it is also a huge year for edgy teen movies, and specifically like feminine edgy teen movies. And ultimately, when you look at something like Drop Dead Gorgeous, it is like tailor made to be something to appeal to queer people. You have really beautiful outfits. You have a bevy of character actors, because if there is anything a queer person loves, it's a character actor, and that's what this movie is just chock full of. It's endlessly quotable, and this is a movie that was maligned by critics, and that is going to innately always speak to the queer community, because we have been told since birth everything that we do and like is bad. So we get protective of these sorts of off-ball movies that we seem to understand on a level other people do not, and then it becomes very precious to us, and then we promote it incessantly until we die.
Beautifully put.
And I think that and then once you find it, you are able to, like, my best friend is a huge Drop Dead Gorgeous fan and the queerest person I've ever met in my life. And we found each other through quoting Drop Dead Gorgeous in middle
Nice.
school and Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion, which I feel also counts in the same kind of
Totally.
like canon that
Same
we're talking
umbrella.
about. Oh yeah. And it's, so you also, like Rocky Horror, there's like a community that forms around this movie, which again is, I mean, which is like why it can be so valuable, because again, it's like this inclusive place where only you speak this entire language. Because my other friend who liked Drop Dead Gorgeous but was like our straight friend had like no idea that we were having full conversations in a movie quote, like a quote off, but it still seemed like we were having a conversation. So it was like very confusing to her. But for us, it was like we were in a dialogue, like we were in a serious dialogue together that she just didn't have access to.
I will also say this was a major selling point for me when Chelsey and I started dating. We are currently wearing matching Kirsten Dunst t-shirts. So if anything can attest to the queerness of this film
or our household,
I present it, or our home.
And I also have the same shirt and am huge gay. So
you have the same shirt? Yeah.
I do have the same shirt.
For anyone not watching, for everyone not watching, this is a podcast. It is a beautiful image of Kirsten Dunst holding the photograph that on the other side says "You're next," that she gets in her locker.
Nice. Yeah.
It's a good one.
I want that shirt, by the way, if anybody is shopping for my birthday or Christmas or whatever. It'd be a great shirt. I'm a big Kirsten Dunst fan, as I probably have already alluded to. So,
and this you said this is the first one we've done though for the show, right? Like
this is the first time Kirsten has showed up. We've had Allison Janney on the podcast twice.
Wait, do you know that this is not really a story, but my co-host over on Too Fast, his wife's related to Allison Janney. She's like Aunt Allison.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
What? Why am I now hearing about this?
I don't know. We talk about it a lot on Too Fast, Too Forever. You got to listen to that.
I do sometimes, but only when it's about something I know about, because I've never
or
seen
when we force you to watch Too Fast, Too Furious.
That's true. Yeah, that was a dark day for me.
Allison Janney is currently the #1 most appeared person on This Ends at Prom, because she is in an obscene number of teen movies, either as teachers or parents. She just appears.
That warms my heart.
Is the greatest. And by the way, like Ellen Barkin, oh my
Mm.
God, can we just have like an Ellen Barkin appreciation moment here? Because like, holy fucking shit. She's just the goddamn greatest. She's so good in this movie. The person who gets the most flack in this movie is Kirstie Alley. So let's, if we, all right, I know BJ, you were talking about look who's talking, Scientology propaganda, and sure, I grew up on Cheers. I loved Cheers and I loved Kirstie Alley, and I think she's. The Scientology thing happened, then the Trump thing happened, then she died. And it's like, okay, where
Life
do I
comes at you
put
fast, man?
Where do I put my Kirstie Alley box?
I had to write her obituary for Slash
Yeah.
Film, and it was
Yeah.
one of the most agonizing experiences of my life because she's, as a human being, awful. As
Yeah.
an artist, very important to me.
Yes. How do you think she fits into this movie? Because her performance is the one that I think gets the most criticism, that is still, even in sort of the modern reviews that look back on it sort of fondly, that she's still criticized for it. What do you guys think about her in this?
I think that the people who criticize her, I understand where they're coming from, but I also think that a lot of people don't actually understand this world because their knowledge of pageantry is Toddlers and Tiaras, which is an extremely exaggerated and very specific type of pageant that is actually in the vast minority. It's just the one that's the most terrifying, which is why it gets a reality show, or watching Miss America on TV. The character of Gladys Lehman, every small town pageant or any community pageant, county fair pageant, whoever has a Gladys Lehman, and she nails this character in a way that is so uncomfortable because I know so many moms that acted like this growing up, and they were awful. They were vicariously living through their children. They were making everything about themselves, and at the same time, like, super busybody. Just, she nails it. Like, she really captures it in a way that is upsetting to me. And I like, I get it. I understand the criticism. I also think that her Minnesota accent is the worst one. But the way that I've always justified it in my head is that deep down, she really does believe what she says when she says, I'm in a whole town, looking at a whole town full of losers. Like, she believes
what I'm
that.
looking at.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to be in Mount Rose, but she also knows deep down that the second she leaves that small pond, she's not a big fish anymore. So she's got to be here. But that's my justification of why her accent's not as good.
Chelsey, what do you think?
You know, again, it's one of those things where I'm like, did she do a bad job? I think the movie is perfect, aside from, sure, its problematic elements. But I just wonder too, are we looking at it with like the lens of we hate Kirstie Alley because we're not going to separate the art from the artist? But I'm curious, what exactly were the negative things that critics said at the time? Obviously the Minnesota accent, but I'm curious what else.
So the word, and I like hate to even say that this is the word that kept coming up in like a post Hillary Clinton world, but is screechy, is the word that I encounter a lot in reviews. So, yeah.
Huh. She's rather low voiced, isn't she?
But also, like, that's who that character is. That's like somebody being like, you know, it's really insulting to refer to Tracy Flick as insufferable. She is. Women are allowed to be messy and awful, and she's messy and awful. And I think, again, this goes to, you know, talking about critics who don't understand things. I also don't think critics know what to do when a character is like undeniably wrong when they're a woman. It's like, this isn't a strong female character or a cartoonish femme fatale. What do we do?
Right.
I think just in terms of like purely from performance perspective, that again with Kirsten Dunst, there's an element of what Kirstie Alley is doing here where like the whole mockumentary style just doesn't jive with her brand of comedy. And to me, like where she kind of falls flat is when that happens. And where she really shines is where the movie kind of is presented and shot in more of a traditional sort of movie comedy way. the number of times that I laughed when Kirstie Alley was like just making facial expressions and not saying anything is like astonishing. And that is, I mean, that's always been her kind of bread and butter. Like her physical comedy is fantastic, and it always has been. Again, I think the criticism of Kirstie Alley in this movie, because she wasn't a freaking weirdo psychopath at this point, so I think it has a lot more to do with just people kind of not being yet acclimated to this style, the mockumentary style, and not really like that's not where they're used to seeing Kirstie Alley as a comedic actress, right?
Oh, definitely. And especially because when she's on camera and knows she's on camera, she's putting on a performance on top of a performance.
Right.
It's not just Gladys
really
Lehman. It's Gladys Lehman knowing someone is recording her, which is why those moments where she's like looking at the junk of high school boys is so hilarious, because the mask slips and you see who she really is, and it's that Gladys Lehman sucks.
Yeah. And maybe that is to the point of like the campiness of it, where I see this and I'm not interested at all in whether she's acting in a mockumentary correctly. I'm just interested in the fact that she has created this sort of perfectly overblown character that can say so much with just, like you're saying, her facial expression when Tony walks by and says, "Hey to the folks."
Hey to the folks.
All I want to do on this podcast is quote things, and I'm really just holding back.
You can do that later. I will ask you your favorite quotes, and you can just rattle them off,
Perfect.
and we'll end the podcast that way or something. No, I just want to ask Chelsey. I'm going to have you defend or not defend the problematic stuff. Let's because you brought it up, so you're charged with being canceled. The Will Sasso stuff. How do we feel about that?
I literally am like, how dare you do this to me? Well,
it's your movie, man.
Okay, yeah, you're right. I have no defense of it. It's, I mean, it's obviously very insensitive. I laughed at it growing up, certainly. Doesn't mean that, I mean, I was 11, 12, 13, and it was 1999, 2000, 2001. But, I don't even, when we look back at movies, it's kind of like it's impossible to take them out of their context. And so I don't even think it's like necessarily an interesting thing to talk about, not to say what you're asking me a non-interesting question, but it's just I mean, what do you say? What do you say about it? You can't go back in time and change the entire universe around this film or somehow act like this movie should have understood what the world was going to be like in what, oh my God, 24 years. But I mean, that being said, it's completely fair to be completely turned off by aspects of this movie, Will Sasso, and then including like the very racially insensitive portrayals of Japanese folks. And
oh yes, oh my God, I forgot
that's
about that.
the other problematic element. And I don't know how to even comment on it necessarily, because it's just sort of like, it is what it is. And I still love this movie. And I know that I like to believe that if this movie were to be made now, that wouldn't have happened. But I don't think there's a reason to throw the entire movie out, because if we were going to do that, we would never watch a single movie from 1999.
I think the frustrating thing to me, and I'm not saying that like I know that none of you are like, more Will Sasso, please. But I think the frustrating thing with Fresh Eyes is that like you could cut that character out entirely and like nothing about the movie changes. Like it just seems like
That's true.
superfluous pot shots at a group of people who like we don't need to be taking shots at. Like there are some things you like to minor tweak, like the fact that like they know it's fixed or whatever. Also, while we're on the topic, John Doe is the greatest name.
Oh my God! And Matt Malloy, okay, yeah.
And also the returning Office Space therapist is back in this too.
Yep.
So very exciting. But I think that's what frustrated me about the Will Sasso stuff, is that like I didn't know it was in here, and it just doesn't need, like, it's not like his character does anything to further the plot at any point. So you could just kind of like even somehow you could probably edit the movie and just remove him entirely and still have the same movie.
Oh God. I'm gonna push slightly. It's horrible. Like the representation, terrible. The personification, awful. Like all of those things are you can't argue against it. It's bad. However, his purpose in this movie, Hank does have a purpose. The only redeeming people in Mount Rose are nice to Hank.
Yes.
Everybody who is a bad person in this movie calls him the R word, or they're very dismissive of him, or they're really mean. And it is also a very weird capture of a lot of small towns, because when you live in a small town, if there is like that one person in town who is, you know, visibly disabled in some way, the whole town knows them and they know who they are and they know how to communicate with them in, you know, the supermarket or what have you. That is a very real thing. The problem, however, is the way that it's being presented. Like that is the biggest crime of this entire movie. And you know, I wish that it wasn't there, because it is otherwise just like the one just irrefutable mark against this movie.
Right.
But thematically, it does serve a purpose. And a thing we talk about all the time on The Sunset Prom is that teen movies specifically are time capsules of that time period. They have zero interest in being timeless. They are trying to capture the then and the now immediate. So in a very twisted way, this is a really good look at how society was acceptably viewing the treatment of people like this, because no one bats an eye when Kirstie Alley is like swinging a microphone at him and calling him the R word, but then you have drunk Allison Janney in the crowd being like, "Go Hank, get her!" like just cheering for him, because she actually like she has no problem with him. So it's complicated, it's messy, and it's part of this movie's DNA, because it's also sadly part of 1999's DNA.
I'll say.
That's really good perspective. Thank you for that.
It's a great perspective. I want to like, okay. So I have to say that like Will Sasso's physical comedy in this movie is fucking fantastic. And like that is that like completely divorced from the nature of the character he's playing. To your point, BJ, I think that so Chelsey brought up the whole like Asian stereotype thing. One of the funniest parts in this movie to me is when their adoptive daughter refers to herself as a proud Japanese American, and as part of her like speech,
and the fact that she says Emperor Hirohito.
And there's an element where like every time, even when this movie appears to be engaging in stereotypes and like punching down or whatever, it always actually, like, again, it sort of shows you where it's trying to land its punches. I'm not saying it always succeeds. I'm not saying that like this is acceptable. But whenever, again, like the R word is brought up, right? It's never that we're supposed to be laughing at the expense of his character alongside those people. We're laughing at like, oh my God, they're still using that fucking word. And like, what a bunch of terrible people these people are. And not only is like Will Sasso, his character, like only the good people in the movie treat him well, but he's also like the only remotely redeemable male character in the movie as well, right? Like, or like who's at all has anything about him that's even remotely positive.
And who survives the movie.
And survives the movie, yeah. Yeah, so it's, again, like I hate this whole, I hate the whole conversation of like judge movies by their time. I kind of think it's a cop-out a lot of the time, and like I hate to do it. So I think it's worth sort of criticizing it objectively, but yeah,
well,
everything you said I think is
truths
right.
thing. Like you have to hold the two truths of, it was unacceptable that we were saying that back then. It was unacceptable that this was presented as comedy back then.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to act as if that was not commonplace is ahistorical. And that's the thing. I think people are really uncomfortable with the idea of confronting how bad shit used to be. Like, one of my favorite movies of all time is The Monster Squad, and they call each other the F slur like 75 times. And it's like, I'm not going to go back in time and be like, excuse me, how dare you? Because that's also ahistorical to how people were talking to each other in 1985.
I agree. And like, I think what you're like, to what you're saying, I feel like the makers of this movie also found it unacceptable, right? Like they are trying, if not in the best way imaginable, but trying to sort of be like, stop fucking calling people that word, while also getting laughs out of it. I don't know, it's a very sort of like, it's a weird line
like
to
we're
walk.
Because we're in 99, so we're on like the edge of what will soon become edgelord humor, where it's like, well, I'm not racist, I hate everybody, and it's like, no, you're still racist, like, shut up.
Yeah. Miranda, if you have to pick a favorite character in this movie who you identify most with in this essay, you will go ahead. You just did this thing where you were like, I gotta take a nap before I can say this one, because I have a whole thing lined up. Who is it and why?
Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines my favorite character. I mean, the first thing that comes into my mind is Brittany Murphy's character, who we haven't even talked about yet.
I know we haven't talked about her yet. I keep forgetting she's in it.
This cast is so goddamn packed with stars, most of whom were not stars yet. Her character is just so sweet and special, and I think that she has to be it.
And she's also the hero in a lot of ways.
She is,
because she's like, she allows our hero to become the hero by giving her tap costume.
Her tap costume, yep.
And she didn't have to do that, but she knew there only needed to be one Liza in the family, and her brother has better legs than she does.
And it's funny you mentioned that, Chelsey, because I'm like, is there anything she does in this movie where if you took her out of it, it would change it in any way? That's the only one. I love her in this, and I keep forgetting she's in it. And I also, whenever I watch it, I'm like, oh man, she was so fucking great, and I'm so fucking bummed she's dead.
I mentioned this very briefly in the intro, but like, I'm watching King of the Hill for the first time and really appreciating her as Luann, and she's basically Luann in this movie. Like, she's very, very close to Luann, like that kind, maybe a little dumb, maybe, but also just like so pure-hearted and kind and generous and giving, and just what a talent.
I will also say, not to pop in with another casting fact here, I don't know why I have so many of these, but Allison Janney said that she wouldn't have been cast had it not been for Brittany Murphy, because they had just been in a Broadway show together, and Brittany Murphy was cast in this, and she said, you guys, you got to catch this bitch. And it was Allison Janney.
She's got some chops.
Oh my God, she's a hero 2 times.
Check her out.
That's
right. She's a hero in and on and off of screen.
Double hero.
She's a hero.
The true hero of Drop Dead Gorgeous is Brittany.
Notice how the world has gone to fucking shit since she died.
Yeah, coincidence?
I don't think so. We'll talk. I have a trivia question that you might know the answer to about Allison Janney later on in the episode. We'll move to Chelsey. You can't use Brittany Murphy. If she's your favorite character, who's your second favorite character?
I think Allison Janney is my favorite character. Because I mean,
Loretta.
I mean, from the moment that she said, she's watching, she's with Amer-I-Can after she wins, and she's looking into the camera, and she is talking to Kirsten Dunst's mom, Ellen Barkin, who has recently been exploded out of her trailer with a beer can then fused to her hand, and she just looks right in and she goes, I got some.
That was her only improvised line.
That's her only improvised line. See? Brilliant. But yeah, she just brings something so special that nobody else. I don't think there's just anybody like Allison Janney that could bring what she brought to this role. And I just, I love every minute she's on camera. I love most smartest. Get a picture of that most smartest.
Most smartest.
I don't know how
Talking
many
up your
times I
kid
said that
hearing
as a
it.
kid. Yeah. Or, take a picture, it'll last longer. I mean, I feel like that alone, that moment, it's just, there's so many iconic Allison Janney moments. And she's also very much a hero in this movie, I think, because she kind of steps in, she tries to give Amber that scotch to help her sleep when she's stressed out. What's more heroic than giving a high schooler a drink to help her sleep? I don't know what.
The scene with her flirting with the bartender is like, I just, every time.
I see you're married.
I see you're married. Catch us in your mouth, I'll give you crazy.
And that bartender too, who who is that guy? Some random extra who's like having a great fucking time. It's so funny.
Outside of most smartest, though, I would argue that her best line, though, is when she's harassing the candy striper and says, "What a nice cool mint help if I shoved your head up your ass."
That was definitely the funniest thing to me when I was
Oh
a
my
kid
God.
and watching this movie. I thought that was the funniest shit I had ever heard in my life.
I hope you have a super day too. Getting stuff chucked at her by Ellen Barkin. Incredible.
She yells for cigarettes.
Brittany Murphy and Allison Janney are off the table. BJ, who's your favorite?
Oh God, taking them off the table. Mindy Sterling is underrated as hell as Iris in this movie.
Also, big
Iris.
99 from Mindy Sterling. Jesus Christ. But yeah,
Oh my
God.
She's so funny.
So funny.
She has two moments that just really get me. One of them is when she's separating Amber and Becky from each other and they're fighting, and Kirsten Dunst is yelling, I hate her," and Mindy Sterling goes, I know, we all do. And if you're not listening for it, you miss it, but when you hear it, you're like, oh God damn it, that's so good. Because she just has all of these little throwaway bits that I'm so glad are there, like making fun of the priest for being an alcoholic by making the glug glug pantomime. And then so she's so effortless in front of those cameras, but then you get her on stage where she's introducing Gladys for the pageant. She's like, I want to take you back 17 years. And it's so clearly somebody who is terrified to be in front of the public, and she's hilarious and doesn't get enough credit for how funny she is in that movie.
Oh, absolutely.
Agreed. Joey, your turn.
She's not my favorite. I think she's only been in one movie, but Laurie Sinclair, who is the wannabe actor, the aspiring actor, I think is wonderful. She's one of the, we need to have 8 instead of just 3 or 4. And I thought she was great. I do want to just, we mentioned her before, but Amy Adams is so goddamn good.
Movie.
She also, I don't take a lot of notes on these movies because I want to just enjoy them, because I take so many notes for other things and whatever. But I did write down one quote that she said, which I think might be one of my favorite lines in the movie. She says, "They're never going to let you perform naked, I asked." Which I think is so funny. Again, it's one of those kind of in the background. It's not the main thing that's being said at that time, but she just she's trying to be helpful, and she says something that is of no help to anyone, that no one was even thinking about. But she's so funny and she's so good. And I've probably seen her do comedies before, but mostly I think of her as a rival Amy Adams, which I also love. But this is just so polar opposite from that, and she's so good in this.
A lot of her enchanted character, I feel, lives with Leslie Miller.
Aww.
I think Giselle has some, if Giselle was sluttier, she would be Leslie Miller. And I say that with all of the the compliment in the world. I love a slut.
Absolutely.
The person who makes me laugh the most, just because of who he actually is as an actor and the kind of roles he normally plays and how this is just so fucked up, is Matt Malloy. And just the one who, and I guess sort of where he is coming from with a history in improv and that sort of thing, of all the people who understood the assignment, man, does he ever understand the assignment? And the fact that the guy's name is John Doe, but spelled Dough. It's fantastic. Michael McShane is also great. The whole judges panel is fantastic. Lona Williams, who wrote the movie, is the silent judge, right? And who doesn't speak. I have a hard time. Like, I know that she went on to work. So she worked on the Tracy Ullman Show as an assistant, which is how she knew
Sam McMurray.
Sam McMurray, who was on the Tracy Ullman Show. And she went to work on The Simpsons, like the Drew Carey Show and all that sort of stuff. But like, what happened to her? Does anybody know? Because
she wrote Sugar and Spice too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. But took her name off of it and credited it to a non-existent person. But I don't know where she is now.
It's so weird. She's very difficult to track down. It's like she had this very sort of pretty high profile career for a while and was deemed to be like the next up and coming comedy writer, and then like I think she just sort of
I know she has a story by credit for Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse, which is 2015, so it's at least a little bit more recent, but yeah, there's a massive gap in there. My fear is that something happened with Sugar and Spice, to the point where she took her name off of it, that I think maybe that might have done something where it's like, I don't know if this industry is for me, because that is sort of where the gap starts. I think she's like a credit on like Shark Tale as well, but that's an animated movie and those movies take forever to make. So there's no telling like where she got off and where she was still involved.
Yeah, because she was certainly. I mean, it was like it's not like small scale stuff she was working on, and it just ends. And anyway, Lona, if you're Lona or Lana, however you pronounce your name, if you're listening, let us know where you are and what's happening with you, and love to talk to you about that. That'd be an interesting conversation. Let's quote the movie for fun. So.
You got another hour? Because
I know.
My favorite quote, and I gotta say, so we're gonna be talking about like Denise Richards is gonna make another appearance in this podcast at some point, because she is responsible for the single worst performance in the history of cinema.
Don't razzie her. Don't razzie her.
1999. It is Dr. Christmas Jones is the least convincing nuclear scientist in the history of nuclear scientists. She is great in this movie.
But I thought Christmas only came once a year.
Oh, please stop. But the scene where she barges in on the hospital in the anorexia ward, that whole scene is fucking amazing. And like my favorite line is, "She's skinny, not deaf."
She's skinny, Amber, not deaf.
I don't know why why that makes me just like cry my eyes out every time I watch it, but like that's the one that gets me every fucking time. Miranda, you want to rattle off some of your favorites?
Oh, off the top, once a carny, always a carny.
My mom used to say,
never hid that back from us. He chose his career over us. What was it? Once a carny, always a carny.
Mom still cries whenever she sees a tilt-a-whirl or a fat lady in a tube top.
What also plays in my head a lot is roll them over, lay them flat, pin those shoulders to the mat. Oh muskies. It just happens to me sometimes. I don't know. There's a lot that goes on in our house. Chelsey, what else goes on in our house? Other than
how about the commercial about the I grew up right next to these stockyards.
I love it so much. Now I live here now.
I work here now. I work here now.
St. Paul pork products.
Oh, I just love St. Paul pork products.
Oh my god, that fucking scene is so great.
Funny.
Yeah, that happens in our house a lot.
Yeah.
Allison Janney asking if they're on Cops again is very, very funny.
Oh yeah.
When there's
Will Sasso, the whole like, are we on Cops again? Oh my god.
Cops.
Yes.
Cops.
Another good Loretta quote is for Christ's sakes, Amber, the woman clung to your tap. She was all flying through the air like a goddamn lawn dart. Like, or even like the one, I will not do it in the correct tone because it's too high, but when they find out they're staying at the Howard Johnson by the airport.
Oh my god.
And she screams right by the airport. Oh my god.
And then they're not allowed to stay there because like because they get fucked over.
Because it all falls apart.
And then he goes, and then they're taking the picture, and she goes, "Say Airport Hojo." Oh man. You know who we haven't even talked about yet, who's one of my favorite characters, is the mayor.
Oh my god.
Oh fuck, the mayor.
The one who's clapping at the explosion.
I know, he
it's
thinks
part of it.
And then you can
Nice
see it in his
job.
mouth. Good job. Yeah.
I told the goddamn shiners to take the Frida.
Oh yeah,
Lazy
sure,
sons of
Frida.
bitches.
Oh yeah. She was the
Oh my
oldest
God.
living Lutheran. Now she's dead as a doornail every year, every damn year. Yeah, he's so funny, and he also sings a song which I think we all need to sing together. Now or later.
I don't know if we can sing it together.
I know. I feel like
We're
we're
on a
going to have
podcast.
delayed lag, and it's going to be the song in a round.
That's kind of nice.
I do want to give a shout out to Nora Dunn and Mo Gaffney, as well as the state pageant directors, because one, I love Mo Gaffney, and anytime she appears in anything, I'm happy. But just like their ridiculous banter back and forth of everything.
This movie goes in so many directions, and like there's so many like I keep forgetting those characters exist, and then you say it and I'm like, oh my god, that's so fucking
so
great.
Rich.
Where the hell is my waiter? Like,
Oh my god.
Quit that Marco Polo route over there to rip your feathers off.
Like it is so hard whenever we record our like little fake plug for our podcast and be like, if you can't pay for us on Patreon, share us with a friend and write down her phone number or her address book. Like I have to like actively fight myself from slipping into the voice whenever we re-record it.
Oh my god.
And then there's the girl, like the girls in the bathroom, like the pregnant
the bathroom girls. Yeah.
I don't know, like do or something.
Yeah, they're gonna do or whatever.
Farm girl, Tammy Curry.
Yeah.
And Tammy Curry even. God,
yeah, Tammy Curry is great. I love okay, so I have thought way too much about this movie, obviously, as we know.
Yeah.
And there are a couple things that this movie does that I think are incredible. So one, I love the admittance that Gladys is threatened by Tammy Curry, who quote unquote is like not a typical pageant girl, but she's still threatened by her because she wins everything. So that's why she's got to go, which I think is hilarious. But also thinking about the judges, Gladys picks the judges. She actively picked somebody she knows is like a pedophile. Like, what does that say about her as a mom? Incredible. Just remarkable.
Oh, man. Yep.
It's not even really a line, but like I remember the first time I saw this movie and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get this movie was the whole thing with like the oldest living Lutheran.
Well, Frida was the oldest living Lutheran.
Goddamn Shriners.
I think that scene reminded me of the David Cross as the UFO expert in Guffman.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, I don't think we're ever going to see this character again, but I totally understand everything the movie's doing. Benali. It's Blaine, all mixed. It's spelled backwards. Yeah.
There's also just so many great visual gags that they throw in there. Like one of my favorites is when they interview the librarian who was Mount Rose's American Teen Princess in 1945, and then it cuts to that like model. And it's one of those things where it's like, you shouldn't find that funny. That's ageism. But it's like, no, that shit is hilarious. That is a great visual gag.
She has to turn her tiara in for scrap because it's World War II.
And I have to say, like, I'm not the kind of person who finds like gross out humor funny in general. And yet the scene when they all start throwing up
shellfish.
It's so fucking funny.
My mom always said, never eat anything that carries its house around with it.
Yeah.
Who knows the last time it's clean?
See, it's a community affair. Look at this. We can't even stop ourselves. We all have to do it together.
Like, I unironically usually just say like, oh, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, like all the time when I'm stressed out. And it's like, I don't believe in any of those people.
I hope everybody appreciates that I had to work really hard to try and organize this in such a way that we didn't just spend an hour quoting this movie to people.
Oh, you
did a great job.
Hard.
over the podcast waves. Okay, real quick. So here's a trivia question for you, and I'm quite sure BJ knows this. So
Well, now the pressure's on.
maybe I'll leave it to I'll ask Miranda first. See if
Oh
Miranda
my
knows.
God.
Okay.
All right.
Ready? You ready for this?
I'm ready.
You might know the answer as well.
Maybe.
Allison Janney appears in a couple of 1999 movies. We've talked about 2 of them already on the show. This movie shares one very particular, random, weird thing with another movie that she appears in from the same year. What is that one random, weird thing?
I feel like this is a very straightforward question asked in the most roundabout way that I even got confused.
I'm trying to make it hard. I'm trying to make it hard.
You made it hard.
What does this movie, aside from Allison Janney, have in common with another movie with Allison Janney in it from the same year?
I do not know the answer to this. Chelsey, do you
I know the answer.
Of course, BJ knows the answer. We know.
I feel like, is it a election?
No.
I do know the answer.
BJ,
All right,
what is the
BJ, do
answer?
it.
The beautiful song that Becky
Oh!
Lehman Talk sings is the same song Heath Ledger sings in 10 Things I Hate About You.
Wow.
Oh, and I was even thinking about that earlier and how there were 2 performances of that beautiful Frankie Valli classic in the same year. And
with Allison Janney.
Way to go,
in
BJ.
both of
Yep,
them.
with Allison Janney.
Allison Janney also an American Beauty, though, too.
Yes. Yeah.
Jeez.
Big year.
Big year.
So-
Are we done with? I guess we're done with her. We've done.
Are we going to rank Allison Janney movies from 99 at this point? Let's put American Beauty at the bottom.
Well, that's easy. And then the other 2 are just about perfect.
They are.
Ooh, I push back on 10 Things I Hate About You, but that's an entire other conversation. That movie hates lesbians. There you go. That's it. We're done.
we certainly criticized the things that are problematic about that movie when we talked about it, but Joey had never seen it, and
most of these movies this season especially are new to me, so I'm being overwhelmed by sights and sounds.
Good job, BJ. I knew you knew that one, and it's a very strange and random piece of trivia that I
It's a good one.
It's good.
Just had to invoke. It is. Okay. Before we wrap up, is there anything you guys want to say about this movie that you just have to get off your chest and tell the world? I think anybody listening to this who isn't like, oh, okay, I'm going to go see it now, who hasn't already. I don't know what we did wrong, but I think we sold it. We sold it pretty well.
So the one thing I will share, because we didn't talk about her, Tess Weintraub is also underrated. She's hilarious.
Oh God, yeah.
So after I got my first surgery from pancreatic cancer, when I had to have my entire body ripped apart to take tumors out, apparently, I don't remember this because I was on a lot of drugs. The first thing that I said when I saw my scar was, they remade my belly with skin for my butt, even though they did not. They just stapled it together. But apparently my high ass said that, and I was like, this tracks. Like, I'm not gonna question that this is a thing that I did. I love that character. I love her obsession with dogs. I think she's so funny, and also I do know how to do the sign language of Through the Eyes of Love because of this movie.
Wow.
Her line about how her German Shepherd had to go is living on a farm upstate. Like, it is the saddest, sweetest. Like, it's man.
It wasn't his fault. I had beef jerky in my front
pocket. Devastating.
And I also like, I know we sort of mentioned it briefly, but the Soylent Green monologue.
Hilarious.
So amazing.
It's not just that it's hilarious.
She's wearing the scarf.
There's 2 things about it that I especially love. And one is that she's like, she sort of mentions that as like, or Soylent Green, right? And you're like, well, you know, it's going to be Soylent Green. But then like when the monologue is set up, like as she starts saying the words, you're like, it is Soylent Green. But also one of the like little details I love about this movie is like the way the audience at the pageant responds to different things. And like that gets the biggest round of applause and like a standing ovation. Whereas like the whole like weird dancing with Jesus thing, everybody's like, this is kind of fucked up and messed. I love that the audience at the pageant is sort of like us.
But everyone is thrilled by a subpar tap number. That's a very easy tap number.
Yes,
Like
yes.
they
It's not
are
good.
eating it up.
She sells it
It's
though.
not good.
She sells
She
it.
does.
She does.
She does.
I guess if you haven't seen much else entertainment in your life, that might be.
Which is why that moment works so well,
Yeah.
and why it makes it even better when she goes to state, and then that one girl is just killing it to Saturday.
It's a good point though. It's like, again, it's part of like what's the like why this comedy is so thoughtful, because like we're all like, that's not that good. But if Kirsten Dunst came out and did a brilliant tap performance, like it wouldn't be anywhere near as funny. Like it wouldn't be anywhere near
and it wouldn't
as
fit in that world either. Like she's
No.
to get to that level, you have to have wealthy parents that put you in dance since birth.
Right.
It's the small fish, big fish thing, right?
Mhm.
Like once she leaves, just like Kirstie Alley. The one thing I want to say is that that I think what should really, really, truly happen, and I mean this about many films, but certainly this one, is why don't we have more of a Rocky horror for other movies? Like we need to be
This
up
one
there.
needs one.
We need to do it like voice wise, right? We don't need to just like be shadow acting. We need to be movie karaokeing, which I did learn was once a thing in Japan, and it was popular, where you actually got to do the quotes along with the, try to get it as accurate as you can along with the actual video. Did you guys know this existed? Because I did not know. And that is
that's
perfect for this movie.
I know that the Alamo Drafthouse does like quote along screenings every once in a while.
That's cool.
That's not like the karaoke thing, like where it's not competitive, but it seems sort of like performative seems better. Like the quote along is just like you sit in the theater and just sort of yell. I think they even have like subtitles on so you can like say the lines along the Pulp Fiction or whatever you're watching. But that sounds better. Your thing sounds better.
Yeah, Central Cinema does that too. It's called Heckle Vision, Central Cinema in Seattle, where we live. And they'll do it with like The Room, for instance. But yeah, Drop Dead Gorgeous would be a great one for that.
I will give a shout out to Peaches Christ, the drag queen who also hosts movie screenings, because I think it was 2014 or 2015. Peaches did a screening of Drop Dead Gorgeous that also came with a show that was Peaches, Ben de la Creme, Jinx Monsoon, Pandora Box, and Suppository Spelling, where they did like a drag reenactment of Drop Dead Gorgeous that they called Death Drop Gorgeous, which is truly phenomenal, because those are also like camp drag queens who get this movie at its core. And I want that show to be just a thing that happens all the time, because I would like to go.
Please.
I will say, Chelsey, there's something similar, like not quite exactly that, but I want to give a shout out to my friend Christy Walden, who is one of the creators and original performers in Point Break Live.
Oh my God, yes.
So if you don't know what this is, it started in Brooklyn like 15 years ago. And the idea was they did a stage performance of Point Break, but they didn't cast Keanu Reeves. And so Keanu Reeves would just be a random person from the audience every night. And they just bring a person on stage and have them read from a teleprompter every time Keanu Reeves had a line. And it's brilliant and amazing. And they did the same thing. They did another version of it called Terminator 2 Judgment Play, where it's the same thing, except that Arnold Schwarzenegger is just a random audience member who comes in and just reads from a teleprompter for all the Arnold Schwarzenegger lines, and like everybody's like acting around the person, and they're just like reading from a screen, and it's pretty fucking fantastic.
That's
So, more
cool.
of that. More of that. That'd be fun with this movie. Be Kirsten Dunst, and everybody else is just like manic around you.
I wanted to note in closing, I read a New Yorker article by Gia Tolentino, who's just absolutely brilliant. She said, there is a profound and unlikely sweetness to the performances in Drop Dead Gorgeous that transforms the material of the script into something resembling the performance of femininity itself. It is offensive, for sure, completely awful, really, and possibly deadly. It is also irreplaceable, hilarious, surprisingly tender, and lavishly, magnificently absurd, which I just thought was so beautiful. And her whole piece about Drop Dead Gorgeous was just very well written and kind of brought up these ideas of like the whole vibe of this movie does feel sort of like the performance of femininity and the and how strange it feels to perform femininity. And so yeah, I thought that was a really beautifully put idea.
Why is the hardest thing on a podcast to respond to someone who like says something really nice and really well said, and then you're like,
Because we can't all do like the Midwest like knee slap of like, welp, and we're good now.
All right. So we have end of episode questions. So I'm going to start with Miranda because Miranda gets the first time around questions. BJ would too, but BJ already, spoiled it in her slash film. So Miranda, what is your favorite film of all time?
I would say my front-facing favorite film of all time is Almost Famous. And my private favorite film of all time is Look Who's Talking Now.
A Look Who's Talking movie that's not the first one. That's amazing.
I've never even seen the first one. I've never even seen the first one. You know who stars in it?
Not even the second one.
You know who stars in it? Danny DeVito.
Tell him.
You know who else? Diane Keaton. You know what they do? They play talking dogs. It's perfect.
It really is a great film.
I really wish the listener could see the dance that Miranda just did while.
I think they can hear it.
It's in her voice.
We did several years ago. We watched all of Amy Heckerling's movies, so I watched those for the first time, and then we're like, let's just watch the third one just to complete because she had nothing to do with it. Like, let's just watch it. We're like, oh boy, okay. And then to have you say publicly on the record forever and ever that your secret favorite movie is Look Who's Talking Now.
It ain't no secret.
No, it's not really. I was trying to play it off.
Okay.
I will go to the grave for that movie.
I love it. I love that so much.
I think my love for you just like escalated about 25%.
Yeah, the dance did it for me. That was when I was like, oh my God, you're really serious. I also, to Miranda's credit, Miranda's the first person to not complain about that question.
Oh.
Yeah, to be like, here's what I'm gonna say. So like the answer I give to the public is this prestigious film that people think is good, and the other one is the third Look Who's Talking.
I'm the one who asks it, and I would complain about it too. So I am doubly proud. So now the follow-up question, and we might have the answer already. What is your favorite movie from the year 1999?
Oh, I mean, Drop Dead Gorgeous is my favorite.
That's what I was assuming.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I also really love 10 Things I Hate About You. That was a really important movie to me. That's.
You sure you just don't love Frankie Valli?
I do love Frankie Valli. I love Frankie Valli, and I also love Cruel Intentions.
Okay, there you go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a whole.
There's the gamut for you.
We have not done that one yet. That's coming soon.
I have not seen that movie since it was like scandalous for someone my age to watch that movie, which is maybe since it came out or something.
Chelsey came on my podcast to talk about Cruel Intentions.
It was beautiful.
Yep.
It was rad.
It was I really enjoyed recapping that movie. I worked very hard on that recap.
It's true. For days. They were just walking around the house.
I also, again, this is something else you guys don't know, but this is the first time Joey actually worked hard at recapping a movie in the intro. So
I wanted to do you guys. I wanted to do all of you proud. And there's a lot that happens in this movie. I also want to make sure that I got the Sarah Rose, the actual pageant name right, because I knew there were like 8 or 9 words, and I would not remember those.
Sarah Rose knows you're a teenage girl.
And she definitely knows that you are ready for the ultimate in teen glamour.
God.
In case you are bad with voices, that was 2 different people doing the entire commercial. That was not one person. That was okay. So now BJ and Chelsey, you both get the same questions, which, John, we don't really have set second round questions. I have 2 questions
No,
here.
you
But
just make something up and I don't know
good.
about it. Yeah.
Cool. This is really my one job for the show. First question. What is your favorite? Because BJ, is it safe to say this is your favorite movie from 1999, and also your favorite movie of all time is Fright Night? Correct.
Yes, correct.
Cool. And Chelsey, you answered on the Blair Witch episode. You have those questions in the bag. Friend of the show status. You are set.
Okay.
So, your second round questions. What is your favorite teen comedy?
You're asking me to choose between children.
I know that you have a whole podcast that does this. It's like asking, like, what's my favorite Fast and Furious, which is Fast 5. But I get it. But there's an answer. I mean, Miranda danced to Danny DeVito. You can come up with something.
It's Grease 2 is mine.
Hold on. I'll be right back. Hold on.
Is he gonna dance?
What's happening, Joey?
I hope he
I think he's
dances.
going to get some like Grease 2 merch to show you because I feel like there's going to be a payoff here. Here we go.
I'm sure you have the same thing, but
I have that on my refrigerator. Because this is an audio format, it is the I Love Grease 2 We Exist Super Yucky bumper sticker.
Yep.
I have that on my fridge. I have multiple Grease 2 shirts. I have a Grease 2 bowling like button up. I have custom movie art that is above my head in my office at all times. I have it's like one of 50. I got to show it to Maxwell Caulfield when I interviewed him for Grease 2's 40th anniversary, and he was like, I cannot believe that you own all of this. He also thought I was 16, which like I am double that, but thank you. Yeah, it's Grease 2. Like in my heart of hearts, I want to say like Josie and the Pussycats as well, because I also love that quite a bit, but they're like technically in their 20s. So I'm going to go with Grease 2 because it's like wholeheartedly teen.
Do you have a favorite song from the movie? Is it Cool Riders or something else?
My favorite song.
Do it for the country? Do it for your country?
No, I think my favorite one is Who's That Guy?
Okay. Fair answer.
I love that one, but I definitely say like, let's go, let's bowl, let's rock and roll like 100 times a week. So.
Beautiful. Chelsey, do you have a favorite teen movie?
Well, I mean, Drop Dead Gorgeous would definitely be number one. And again, choosing between children, as BJ said, but you know what comes to mind is Bring It On.
Yes.
Which is
Baby's introduction to white privilege and racism.
Yeah, it is a very, very good movie.
It is.
Yeah, and I mean, and when I say good, I mean not only as a comedy, but as a commentary, a social commentary as well, which actually BJ's episode about Bring It On is very, very good too.
Gabrielle Union gets all the credit because she rewrote that character. Thank God.
Yeah. Thank God.
I can't
imagine.
Critics actually got that right? Like critics actually liked that movie. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Did they? The critics?
I think they did.
Critics did like it. They were, but it was very much like, can you believe it? This movie's actually good. It was that sort of energy.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Now, I think this is going to become a standard second guest appearance question. BJ first, then Chelsey. What is your favorite movie featuring someone from this movie that isn't this movie? So like any actor from this movie, another work they've done, or not even necessarily favorite, just a movie you love. Maybe one that you want to champion that people don't know about. Maybe a Kirsten Dunst movie, maybe a Kirstie Alley movie, maybe It Takes Two with Steve Guttenberg and the Olsen twins.
It's going to be It Takes Two for me. I love that movie so much. I love Olsen twin movies. I just do.
Oh, yeah.
But there is something about the way Kirstie Alley, one, looks at Steve Guttenberg, like where it's just like, you're already impressive because you look so in love with this man who is just being the weirdest the whole time. Justice for Clarice. I think she was in the right the whole time. She was being terrorized. It wasn't her fault. But that movie has so much heart and empathy and a lot of really weird comedy camp gags that I think were lost on people when that movie came out. Because if you rewatch it, you're like, wait, no, this movie's camp. This is great. And I think she's really, really good in that movie. Like, just so good.
Is that the one that was like released in theaters and like Dr. Drew is in it? Is that the right
So
one?
it was released in theaters, and it was they wanted
Is
to make.
Dr. Drew in that movie? I feel like Dr. Drew's in that movie.
I don't
Unless
think
I'm
Dr.
like,
Drew's in that
okay,
movie,
I have to
unless
look
it's
this
like
up.
somewhere random. But they were
That's so,
trying
like-
to get an Olsen twins Freaky Friday, and Disney was like,
Okay,
no, we're
right.
not giving you those rights. So they were like, just
Okay.
kidding, it's the Prince and the Pauper, but with them.
No, he's in the latter-day Olsen twins film New York Minute.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
all
when
right.
they're
This is-
like
okay.
adults. This is
With
like
Eugene Levy
peak,
too.
Yeah, this is peak child Olsen twins when you knew the difference between the two of them because Ashley wore dresses and Mary-Kate wore backwards caps.
I was just gonna say Mary-Kate
Got it.
always wore a backwards hat.
Yep, Mary-Kate was the tomboy of all of our dreams.
And
Yeah.
for everyone shouting at their podcatcher right now, Dr. Drew also in the Tim Allen classic Wild Hogs, also playing
Oh,
himself,
good.
basically Dr. Drew.
Well, thank
Mhm.
God for that.
All right, Chelsey, answer to that question. Favorite movie featuring someone from this movie?
I'm going to say Best in Show, featuring Will Sasso as a
Wow.
smaller character. So we're kind of tying everything together here. Mockumentary, Christopher Guest, Will Sasso. I don't know if you guys remember his character, but it's just this small character who works at the fishing shop where the Harold works, who's the guy who has the bloodhound. And he has only a few lines, and it's just reminding him to listen to the mixtape that he gave to him as he's driving away. He's just like, remember the tape. And it's just, he's a very, very funny character, and just such a minor character. But Will Sasso, he's always funny, and he was one of the best people on one of the best shows ever, Mad TV.
That's right.
Good answers
Ooh.
all around.
My answer is of course Spider-Man 2, even though you didn't ask me. But yeah.
Well, I'll give shout out to Wild Things, which I also saw for the first time recently and
hell
absolutely
yeah.
loved.
Dang.
That movie goes harder than any other movie that's ever been made.
goes
It's just
so
like, you ready? Do you think the 6th twist is enough? Well, buckle up because there's like 4 or 5 more twists.
So anyway, it's late. We should go, and this has been delightful. It's so fun to hang out with a bunch of people on the internet.
Sure is.
You guys want to promote stuff? You want to promote your stuff? Go ahead. Tell people about your stuff.
Everybody at the same
Don't all go at
time.
once.
Miranda, tell people where to find Chelsey and BJ on the internet.
I will tell people where to find Chelsey and BJ on the internet. John, thank you. Chelsey Weber-Smith is the host and writer and producer of a show called American Hysteria. I am also a producer and editor of that show, as well as You Are Good and You're Wrong About. And BJ Colangelo is co-host of the incredible film podcast This Ends at Prom. Did I do it?
You did very
Did
good.
do it. I'm also I'm one of the lead editors over at Slash Film, so I talk about all movies over there, not just teen.
Yes.
Cool.
That's all I do.
Awesome.
I'm also in a
Yeah.
band called Cuenca, which you can also
I
find on
plugged
the
that
internet.
band in the intro.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're
so
welcome.
nice. Counting Crows follows my band on Instagram.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's my claim to
I will
fame.
also say that this is the first time I ever did the written down recap, and John always writes who our guests are, and didn't do that. So I was on my own. I'm just like, I don't know who any of these people are except for Chelsey, so I have to go onto Instagram. So much work, but I got it.
Well
So.
done.
I'm
you,
proud of
Joey.
you.
Thank
It was
you.
really
Thank
hard
you.
to find me. My screen name's my name. So
I did the
hard.
barest. I did the barest of efforts, but I got there.
We're all so
He
grateful.
really likes to do as little work as possible for this podcast.
On this show.
It's
It's a point of pride.
It's pretty stunning.
Because literally every other show I do every single bit of work.
He
So
does
to
like
do
19
no
other
work.
podcasts. So
Yeah.
God bless him.
Well, speaking of other podcasts, John, next time, I know that I have a hat that is kind of like a shark's fin. And I will also say, look out for frogs.
Oh, nice. I didn't realize we were doing that.
At some point, we got to do it. We got to do it at some point, right? Or are we
I
just going to
know.
stay here forever?
Yeah. No, we got to go. I know. It's late. I kept you guys too long. Chelsey, BJ, Miranda, so much fun. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
This was so great.
And Miranda and BJ, we look forward to having you back to become official friends of the pod.
What
And
do we
Chelsey,
call third appearance? Is that still friend of the pod?
I
Is that
don't know.
super friend?
I don't know. We haven't had it
It can
yet.
be besties.
Friend of a friend.
Get some necklaces.
Besties. Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Joey,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much. We'll see y'all next time.
Thank you, John. Look out for frogs.